Welcome to the Sky Commander Flight Brief. It's your mission-ready podcast for drone pilot training and aerial insights across Canada.
From Transport Canada rules to real-world drone ops, we break it down, take you higher, and help you earn your wings. Because here at skycommander.ca, we don't just fly.
It hints there's more to it. It's a masterclass, a deeper level, maybe a philosophy or a community focus, perhaps.
It's definitely intriguing, sets them apart from just, a basic tips show. Skycommander.ca is the obvious next step. Precisely. If you're thinking about flying a drone in Canada, boom, this content is aimed right at you.
Powered by skycommander.ca.
The elite podcast for Canada's drone pilot. Okay, let's get started.
Today, we are undertaking a really critical mission, mastering the regulatory landscape for professional uncrewed aviation.
Yep.
And this isn't just about passing a test. It's about establishing a professional baseline. We've compiled a deep stack of source material covering the FAA Part 107 exam, advanced operational tactics, and we're even looking north to Canada's rules, CARAR's Part 9.
This is a high-stakes one for sure, because for the professional pilot, simply scoring a 70%, that isn't the goal. That's just the minimum to walk through the door.
Right.
Our mission today is all about giving you that operational and intellectual edge, understanding the concepts behind the rules. We want to transform you from just a compliant operator into a systematic, safety-conscious, and commercially resilient aviator.
I like that. Systematic resilience.
Yeah, because this foundational knowledge, it's what lets you navigate future changes, It future-proofs your career.
That's the mindset we need. So we are going to cover the whole spectrum today, everything from the kind of frustrating logistics of the FAA's testing process. We'll get into why some exams feel unequally unfair, all the way to those obscure technical questions.
Oh, yeah, the ones that always surprise people.
Exactly. We're talking manned aircraft aerodynamics, the subtleties of kinetic energy limits for flying over people, advanced weather interpretation, and the really critical differences between U.S. and Canadian microdrone rules. By the time we're done here, you will have a world-class regulatory brain ready for anything.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into it. The first hurdle, the Part 107 exam itself, the logistics, the strategy. The sources point out that the first sort of psychological challenge is just how variable the test is.
It is. The FAA uses this massive question pool, and the system generates a different 60-question combo for every single person who sits down to take it.
And that's where that phrase, unequally unfair, comes from.
That's exactly it. You could draw a test that's heavy on regulations, which most people find a bit easier. Or you could get one that's just loaded with complex sectional chart questions or, deep dives into obscure weather theory.
So you can't really predict the flavor of your exam.
You can't. And that's why the only winning strategy is concept mastery. If you just try to memorize 1,000 flashcards, you're just gambling. You're betting the FAA asks those exact questions.
Right.
But if you master the concepts underneath, you can answer the questions they haven't even written yet.
Okay, so let's nail down the hard numbers for the exam itself.
Certainly. It's 60 multiple choice questions. You get 120 minutes, a full 2 hours.
Which is pretty generous usually.
It is, but you don't want to rush those chart analysis questions. The passing score is 70%, so that's 42 correct answers out of 60. But the real foundation, the blueprint for what you study, it isn't some commercial textbook.
It's the ACS.
It's the Airman Certification Standards, the ACS. That's the official guide.
Tell us a bit more about how that ACS really works as the ultimate reference.
Well, the ACS specifically, FAA's ACS 10B for unmanned aircraft systems, is basically the FAA's promise to you.
Okay.
It's them saying, every single question we ask will fall under one of these specific codes. It details every knowledge area, risk management topic, every skill. So if you're studying something that isn't in the ACS, you're honestly wasting your time.
You're studying the wrong thing.
You are. We always tell pilots, download it, have it open, reference it constantly. It's like having the architectural drawings for the test.
Studying the blueprint versus just, guessing the decorations.
That's a great way to put it.
So that's critical for efficiency. But here's where the real professional advantage kicks in, and this is after the test is done. Whether you pass or fail, you get what's called the Airman Knowledge Test Report, or AKTR. Why should a pilot who scored, say, a 90% still treat that AKTR like it's gospel?
Because the AKTR is the single most valuable piece of professional feedback you will ever get from the FAA. It is a literal heat map of your knowledge gaps.
A heat map, I like that.
It lists the specific ACS codes for every single question you missed. So let's say you missed a question on battery storage protocols or an advanced TAF interpretation. The AKTR doesn't just say you missed a weather question.
No.
No. It will give you a code, something like UA.IIBK3.
So instead of just vaguely thinking, okay, I need to brush up on weather, I can pinpoint the exact component of weather theory I messed up.
Exactly. A systematic pilot, a professional, immediately maps that code back to the ACS document and closes that precise knowledge gap. And this isn't just academic, this is a competitive advantage.
How so?
Well, when a high-end client or an insurance underwriter asks, how do you manage risk? A pilot who can say, I track my failures via the AKTR and systematically apply training to eliminate those specific ACS-defined risks, that demonstrates a whole other level of maturity.
It weaponizes the exam into a training tool.
It completely reframes it. It's not a hoop to jump through anymore. It's a professional assessment.
That's a huge shift in mindset. Now, let's tackle what some people call the 3 clock problem, because this confuses almost everyone. The difference between your certificate, your recency, and your registration.
Yeah, this confusion comes from the FAA using different timelines for different things. So let's start at the base layer, the remote pilot certificate.
Huh.
Think of this like your commercial driver's license. It never expires. Unless the FAA formally revokes it or you surrender it, you hold it for life, theoretically.
So the UAG test at the physical testing center, that's a once-in-a-lifetime thing, unless you get in trouble.
Precisely. Now, the next clock is aeronautical knowledge recency. This is the requirement to stay current. The rules are always changing, after all.
Right.
You have to demonstrate this recency every 24 calendar months to legally fly under Part 107. And the huge change after 2021 is how you do this.
You don't have to go back to the test center.
No, you don't. No more paying for and taking another physical test. You just complete the free online recurrent training course on the FAA safety website. It's often called ALC 677. This is your refresher course, like an eye exam for your knowledge.
That is a critical piece of information.
Yeah.
So recency is a 2-year clock, and you satisfy it with a free mandatory online course.
Correct. And you have to keep that completion certificate. You download it right after you pass the online quiz.
Got it. And the 3rd clock.
The final clock is the aircraft registration clock, which is under U.S. Part 48. This is totally independent of you, the pilot. Aircraft registration is typically valid for 3 years.
So that's the license plate for the drone itself.
Exactly. So all 3 things have to be current for any flight. Your certificate, your 24-month recency, and the drone's 3-year registration.
That clarity is just essential. Okay, so now let's move to how the pros actually study. The FAA material is vast. How do we structure it?
We use the mnemonic RAWLON. It's just a simple way to break down the 6 major content areas from the ACS so you know you're covering everything.
Okay, let's break it down. RAWLON.
R is for regulations. Your Part 107 rules, waivers, accident reporting.
Okay.
A is for airspace. Classification, how to read sectional charts, authorizations. W is weather. TAFs, METARs, fronts, all of that.
Got it.
L is for loading and performance. Think density, altitude, weight, and balance. O is for operations and ADM. Visual observers, crew management, hazardous attitudes.
MEN.
And finally, N is for night and special topics. Things like the new night rules and remote ID.
So RAWLON gives you the buckets. But you mentioned studying at the correct cognitive level. That sounds a bit academic, but it feels like it has huge real-world meaning for a test that's all about risk management.
It absolutely does. Cognitive levels just define how deeply you need to know the material. Level 1 is just recall, simple memorization.
Like, what's the ceiling of Class D airspace?
Exactly. That's the lowest level. But the FAA primarily tests at level 3, application and scenario-based decision-making.
Can you give us an example of how a question might shift from that simple recall to application?
Sure. A recall question is, what's the speed limit for a UAS? The answer is 100 miles per hour or 87 knots. Simple.
Right.
An application question is something like, you're looking at a sectional chart. The TF indicates IFR conditions are coming in 3 hours, and the grid you are in has an MAF of 10,200 feet. You need to survey a tower marked at 9,500 feet MSL. Can you proceed, and what's your plan?
Wow, so you're stacking knowledge of airspace, weather, MEFs, operational limits, all the letters of RAWLON, basically.
You're stacking everything to make a dynamic go-no-go decision. The test wants to know if you can be a systematic decision maker, not just a fact robot.
That focus on application really is what separates the professional from the hobbyist. And just finally, for the big day itself, what's the simple memory aid to make sure it all goes smoothly?
Just remember ID, KTS, time.
ID, KPS, time.
ID. You must bring a government-issued photo ID, no test. Simple as that. KTFs, you will be given the official knowledge testing supplement booklet that has all your charts and figures. You can't bring your own, so you have to know how to use theirs instantly. And time. Manage your 120 minutes. Don't get stuck on one hard question for 20 minutes. Flag it, move on, come back later. Managing the test is part of the test.
All right, now let's move into that foundational core knowledge. The stuff that makes you an actual aviator, not just someone operating a remote control. And the sources all point out that the first big shock for a lot of Part 107 candidates is having to know about the control surfaces of manned fixed-wing aircraft.
Yeah, that one throws a lot of people.
It seems so counterintuitive. I mean, why does the FAA care if we know what an aileron does when we're flying a multi-rotor?
It seems like busy work, but the reason is profoundly serious. It's all about shared airspace safety.
See and avoid.
See and avoid. We operate down low where you find small trainers, helicopters, all sorts of manned traffic. The FAA needs you, the remote pilot, to understand how that manned aircraft maneuvers so that in an emergency, you can predict what it's going to do.
So you can maintain predictable separation.
Exactly. And that means you have to understand the 3 axes of flight and what surfaces control movement around them.
Okay, let's break this down. Let's think of it as controlling a machine in 3D space. What are the 3 fundamental axes?
Okay, so everything pivots around the aircraft's center of gravity. First, you have the longitudinal axis. It runs straight from the nose to the tail.
Okay.
Movement around this axis is called roll, like the plane tilting its wingtips up and down.
And what controls that?
That's controlled by the ailerons. They're the hinged surfaces on the outer edge of the main wings. One goes up, the other goes down, and the plane rolls.
Got it. Longitudinal roll, ailerons. What's next?
Second is the lateral axis. This one runs from one wingtip to the other, right through the middle. Movement around this axis is called pitch.
So nose up, nose down.
Precisely. And that's controlled by the elevators, which are on the horizontal part of the tail. You pull back on the yoke, the elevators go up, the tail is forced down, and the nose pitches up.
Okay, so lateral, pitch, elevators. That leaves one more.
The last one is the vertical axis. It runs straight up and down through the center of gravity. Movement around this is called yaw.
The nose swinging left to right.
Yep. And that's controlled by the rudder, the vertical moving part on the tail.
So that combination, longitudinal roll ailerons, lateral pitch elevators, vertically yaw rudder, that's mandatory knowledge. But to really deepen this, the sources mention things fixed-wing pilots obsess over, but we might not. P-factor and torque effect. Why are these on the test?
Right. This is where the ACS gets into some advanced knowledge. And even though most of us fly multi-rotors, fixed-wing drones exist, and a motor and a propeller work the same way regardless.
Okay.
The torque effect is just Newton's third law. As the propeller spins clockwise, it creates an equal and opposite force that wants to make the entire aircraft body spin counterclockwise.
I see.
This force is strongest at low air speeds and high power like on takeoff. Now think about a heavy lift multi-rotor with 8 powerful props. Understanding the forces creating unwanted rotation is absolutely critical for stable flight.
And what about P-factor?
P-factor, or asymmetrical thrust, happens because the propeller blade on the downswing has a higher angle of attack than the blade on the upswing, especially when the aircraft is pitched up in a climb.
So one side of the propeller is generating more thrust than the other.
Exactly. And that creates a yawing moment, pulling the nose to one side. A fixed-wing pilot corrects with the rudder. A multi-rotor's flight controller corrects with differential motor speed. But you, the pilot, need to understand the physics at play.
So knowing about torque and P-factor shows the FAA you understand the underlying physics of flight, that you're managing forces, not just pushing a joystick.
That is the perfect way to phrase it.
Okay, shifting from the forces of flight to reading the sky we fly in. Sectional charts. Let's decode one of the most misunderstood things on there. Maximum elevation figures, or MEFs.
MEFs are so important for pre-flight planning, especially in the mountains or built-up areas, but we have to be really clear about this. MEFs are safety reference points only.
Not a legal altitude.
Not a law, not a minimum altitude. Their only purpose is to give you a quick worst-case scenario number for a specific area.
And what does it reference exactly?
It shows the highest point, whether that's a mountain, a smokestack, a big antenna, within a specific block on the chart. That block is a 30-minute by 30-minute quadrant of latitude and longitude.
And how do we actually read the numbers? I know that's where the confusion comes in on the exam.
It's a simple format, but it's really easy to forget under pressure. The MEF is shown as 2 stacked numbers. The big number is thousands of feet, means sea level, MSL. The small number is hundreds of feet, MSL.
So if I see a big 10 over a small 4,
That means the highest obstacle in that 30 by 30 minute box is 10,400 feet MSL.
Okay, let's use the example from the outline then. The area around Montrose Regional Airport, MTJ.
Right. If you look at that quadrant on the chart, the MEF is 11,700 feet. The FAA loves using this in scenario questions. They'll ask, based on the MEF, what's the highest obstacle you should plan for in this quadrant? The answer is 11,700 feet. It proves you're planning for clearance and separation, even if you're only flying at 400 feet AGL.
It's about situational awareness of the entire operational area.
Exactly.
Okay, finally, let's move to the giant chameleon of the sky, weather. We have to go beyond just reading TAFs and METARs and really understand air mass dynamics and fronts.
Right, because air masses define the weather. And air mass is just this huge uniform body of air that takes on the temperature and moisture of whatever it sits over for a while.
That's the chameleon part.
That's the chameleon. Over the ocean in the tropics, it becomes warm and moist. Over Canada in the winter, it becomes cold and dry. And when these air masses move, they bring that weather with them.
And when two different ones collide, we get a front. And that collision dictates all the risk.
It dictates everything. The severity of the weather depends entirely on which air mass is being the aggressor. So there are 4 primary types we need to know.
Okay.
First, and most dangerous for us, is a cold front. The dense, cold air acts like a wedge and shoves the lighter, warm, moist air up really fast.
And that rapid vertical movement causes instability.
Massive instability. That's what creates severe thunderstorms, heavy rain, and intense gusty winds. And the big risk for drones is wind shear. Right at the leading edge of that front, it can be devastating.
Okay, so cold fronts are fast and violent. What about warm fronts?
With a warm front, the warm air is the aggressor, but because it's less dense, it gently glides over the cold air. It's a much more gradual process.
So you get different weather.
Totally different. You get widespread stable clouds like stratus clouds, which leads to prolonged steady rain, fog, or low ceilings. The visibility is often terrible, but you usually don't have that violent wind.
And the other two?
You have a stationary front where neither air mass is moving. They're in a standoff. So you get the same weather-low clouds, haze, rain, just lingering in one spot for days. This can shut down commercial ops for a long time.
Right.
And then the most complex is an occluded front. That's where a fast, cold front catches up to and overtakes a warm front, lifting that warm air completely off the ground. The weather becomes a messy mix of both and can be really unpredictable.
So as a pilot on the ground, how do I confirm a front is actually passing through? What are the key telltale signs?
The number one indicator is a significant, rapid change in temperature at the surface. You can literally feel the new air mass take over. Oh. And the second indicator, the most dangerous one for our operations, is a shifting wind. A change in direction, a change in speed, or both. That collision between the air masses generates powerful air movement. If you see the wind swing from the south to the northwest in a matter of minutes, you are in a frontal zone.
And you should probably land.
You should reevaluate your flight plan, absolutely. The risk of sudden turbulence is just too high.
All right, let's shift gears now into the operational regulations, the rules that govern our day-to-day work. And we have to start with a huge source of confusion. The 250-gram paradox. That 0.55-pound line has become almost mythical, but how the rule is applied is completely different for a commercial Part 107 pilot versus a recreational flyer.
It is. And it's a classic exam trap that hinges completely on your intent. Intent. Under U.S. Part 48, if a drone is flown strictly for recreation and it weighs less than 0.55 pounds or 250 grams, it is exempt from registration. That's why that number is so famous.
Okay.
But the second you fly that exact same drone under Part 107 for any commercial purpose, any non-recreational reason, that exemption is gone. It vanishes.
So the rule is absolute then for commercial ops?
The rule is absolute. Every single drone flown under Part 107, regardless of its weight, must be registered with the FAA.
So my tiny DJI Mini 4 Pro, which a hobbyist doesn't have to register, if I use it to inspect a cell tower, it immediately needs to be registered and marked with an N number.
Precisely. Your intent dictates your compliance. You're flying under the authority of Part 107, you're a commercial operation, you follow the full commercial rules.
And let's quickly compare that to Canada, because CARS Part 9X uses that 250-gram line very differently.
They do. In Canada, that 250-gram threshold determines both your pilot licensing and your aircraft registration. A microdrone, which is anything under 250 gram, is exempt from both pilot certificates, basic or advanced, and it's exempt from registration.
Wow, so it's much less regulated for those small drones up there.
For commercial use, yes, significantly. So for any cross-border work, knowing that distinction is absolutely vital.
Good to know. Okay, next up, the post-2021 game changer. Operations over people, or OOP. This changed the answer from you need a waiver to potentially, well, if you fit the category, you can fly. And it's all based on kinetic energy.
It is. The FAA moved to a risk-based approach, and the risk they care about is the potential for serious injury if the drone hits someone. This puts a lot of the burden on manufacturers to prove their aircraft are safe.
So let's break down the 4 categories. What's category 1?
Category 1 is the easiest. The drone must weigh 0.55 pounds, 250 grams or less. And crucially, it cannot have any exposed spinning rotors that could cut someone. It also has to be remote ID compliant. The risk is considered so low you can fly over people with minimal restrictions.
Okay, that's straightforward. Now what about category 2? This is where it gets more technical.
Category 2 is the main one for most small to medium commercial drones. They're over 0.55 pounds, but less than 55 pounds. And the key technical requirement is that the drone must not cause an injury greater than 11 foot-pounds of kinetic energy on impact.
So what does 11 foot-pounds actually feel like? How do we visualize that?
The best analogy is a 12-ounce soda can hitting someone at about 25 miles per hour.
Okay, that would hurt.
It would definitely hurt. You'd get a nasty bruise. But statistically, it's very unlikely to cause a skull fracture or a major internal injury.
And there's a lot of paperwork to prove this.
Oh, yeah. The manufacturer has to get an FAA means of compliance, MOC, to prove the drone meets this limit, and then the pilot has to file a declaration of compliance, DOC, saying they're operating it correctly. It's a serious process.
And category 3 just ups that energy limit.
Exactly. Category 3 allows for a drone that could impact with up to 25 foot-pounds of kinetic energy.
And the analogy for that?
Think of the force of a punch from a trained boxer. It's a significantly higher risk. Because of that, the operating rules are much stricter.
Right, you can't just fly over anyone.
No, you can only fly over people who are part of the operation, people who are under a protective structure like a covered bus stop, or people inside a restricted access area that you control. You cannot fly over the general public with a Category 3 drone.
That protective structure rule is a big one. And finally, category 4.
Category 4 is the highest risk. It's for complex, often experimental systems. And it is the only category that requires the drone itself to have an FAA airworthiness certificate, just like a manned aircraft.
And there's one blanket restriction that applies to all 4 categories, no matter what. This is a critical point.
Yes. This is the open-air assembly restriction. You are prohibited from conducting sustained flight hovering or loitering over any large crowd or public event.
Like a concert or a football game.
A concert, a festival, a marathon, anything like that, period. You might be able to transition quickly over some people if you meet the Cat 1, 2, or 3 rules, but intentionally flying over a dense crowd is banned without a very specific, very hard-to-get waiver. The risk is just too high.
Okay, let's move to the bedrock of compliance. Prohibited substances and accident reporting. For the professional pilot, there's just zero tolerance for impairment. What are the specific rules on alcohol and drugs?
They are non-negotiable and strictly enforced. For alcohol, you cannot act as a remote pilot in command within 8 hours of drinking. 8 hours from bottle to throttle.
Right.
But more critically, the federal blood alcohol content, or BAC, limit is 0.04%. The FAA is unforgiving because they're not just tracking when you start drinking, they're tracking your impairment level.
And that's half the legal limit for driving a car in most states.
Exactly. Aviation demands a much higher standard.
And the drug rule is where federal law can really clash with state laws.
This is a huge compliance trap. The FAA is governed by federal law, period. So when it comes to marijuana, there are no exemptions for medical use.
Not at all.
Zero. If you are using a federally controlled substance, you are impaired in the eyes of the FAA, regardless of what your state has legalized. And even more, a conviction related to marijuana possession, sale, anything, results in the denial of your application for any airman certificate for 1 year from the date of conviction. It's a zero-tolerance world.
Very clear. Okay, let's wrap this section with the reporting requirement. You have a crash. When does the FAA need to know about it?
The standard is very specific and gets tested a lot. You must report an accident to the FAA within 10 calendar days if one of 2 conditions is met.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is if the accident results in a serious injury to any person. And serious injury has a very specific definition. It means hospitalization for more than 48 hours, loss of consciousness, broken bones, severe nerve damage, that sort of thing.
And the second condition?
The second is if the accident results in property damage, and this excludes damage to your drone itself exceeding $800.
$800. That seems like a really low number in this day and age.
It is, and that's why it catches so many people out.
Give me an example.
Okay, let's say your drone has a problem on landing and clips your neighbor's fancy mailbox. You get a quote, and the repair, including labor, is $750.
No report needed.
No report. But if that same drone hits their satellite dish and causes $850 in damage, you must file a report with the FAA within 10 days. They don't care about your drone. They care about the collateral damage and the risk your operation posed to the public. It tests your honesty and your duty to the regulations.
The sources are so clear on this next point. Regulations can only do so much. The huge majority of preventable aviation accidents trace right back to human error.
That's right.
Which is why the FAA focuses so intensely on pilot judgment and decision-making, starting with the most basic function of all, just seeing and avoiding other aircraft.
Yeah.
And they don't just say, look around. They prescribe a very specific method for scanning the sky.
They do. The see and avoid requirement is the remote pilot's #1 job, along with the visual observer, if you're using one. And this structured scanning method is designed by aviation psychologists to fight human fatigue and tunnel vision.
So if you just kind of sweep your eyes back and forth, your brain starts to filter things out.
It does. It filters out non-moving objects, and your visual acuity just plummets.
So what is the precise FAA-recommended method we need to be practicing?
It's a series of short, structured movements. First, you scan from right to left, or left to right, doesn't matter which, across the horizon.
Oh.
For each little segment, you scan an area that's about 30 degrees wide. That's a manageable slice of your vision.
And you don't stare at it.
No, and this is the critical part. The duration of each stop, where your eyes actually focus, should be no longer than 2 to 3 seconds, any longer. And you start to get mental fatigue and fixation.
There's an overlap.
A mandatory overlap. When you move to the next 30-degree segment, you have to overlap the previous field of view by 10 degrees.
And that 10-degree overlap is the key to making sure you don't miss something that was right on the edge of your last scan.
Absolutely. That whole technique, 30 degrees, 2-3 seconds, 10-degree overlap, is engineered to eliminate tunnel vision, where your brain gets locked on a central point and becomes effectively blind to motion in the periphery. It's how you spot a small, fast-moving aircraft coming at you.
Okay, moving from vision to physics, let's talk load factors and performance. This is where we see the real physical consequences of flying aggressively. How is the load factor on a drone structure affected by what you're doing?
Load factor is just a measure of the total stress on the aircraft structure, the frame, the arms, the rotors, and it's expressed in Gs, where 1 G is just the normal force of gravity.
And that number goes up whenever you do anything other than fly straight and level.
Exactly. The moment you enter a turn, you have to generate more lift than 1 G just to maintain your altitude, which means you're putting more stress on the entire airframe.
And the increase is pretty dramatic.
It's exponential. In a gentle, constant altitude turn with a 30-degree bank, the load factor jumps to 1.154 Gs. But if you do a sharp 60-degree bank you might, in an emergency avoidance or a fast cinematic pivot, the load factor instantly doubles to 2 Gs.
2 Gs. So the drone structure suddenly has to support twice its own weight plus its payload.
That's exactly right. And understanding this stops pilots from causing a structural failure by combining high speeds with aggressive turns, especially when they're carrying a heavy payload near the drone's max takeoff weight.
And this connects directly to the environment, doesn't it? Let's quickly circle back to density altitude, because that dramatically impacts how hard the drone has to work in the first place.
Density altitude is arguably the most critical performance concept a Part 107 pilot needs to master. High density altitude, which you get from high temperatures, high humidity, or high elevation, means the air is thin.
And thin air means low air density.
Right. And that lack of density makes the propellers less efficient because there are just fewer air molecules for them to push against. So the motors have to work much harder, which kills your battery life, makes your climb performance sluggish, and can even overheat your components. A pro always accounts for density altitude, always.
So all this technical knowledge, it's really worthless without strong aeronautical decision-making, or ADM, and effective crew resource management, or CRM. This is the heart of mitigating risk.
It is. The FAA sees ADM as a systematic process, which is why it's tested so heavily. And CRM is the tool you use to make sure those decisions are collaborative and use every asset you have.
How do you define CRM?
CRM is the effective use of all your available resources. The people, so you, your VO, your ground crew, the hardware, so checklists and performance data, and the information, so weather reports and charts, to guarantee a safe and successful outcome. And it has to be integrated into all phases of the operation.
From the briefing to the debrief.
Exactly.
How does CRM apply to, say, a typical two-person drone team? It can sound like something for big airline crews.
But it's mandatory for professionalism, even with a small team. For a PIC and VO, CRM means 1, a mandatory briefing. Before you take off, the PIC formally briefs the VTO on the mission, the emergency plan, and the abort criteria. No assumptions.
Okay.
2, challenge and response checklists. You read the checklists out loud. Battery secured and charged. Confirmed, 98% locked. It provides redundancy.
That makes sense.
3, open communication. The VO has to be empowered to call out a hazardous attitude or a procedural mistake without any fear of getting shut down. And 4, a formal debriefing. After the flight, you talk about what went right and, more importantly, what almost went wrong.
And that empowered communication helps catch those psychological traps the FAA calls hazardous attitudes. We have to know these 5 cold.
Yep, because recognizing these in yourself or your crew is the last firewall against an accident.
Okay, let's run through them. First up, anti-authority.
That's the rules are for other people I know better attitude. The antidote is follow the rules, they're usually right. Aviation history is written in the blood of people who ignored the rules.
Second, resignation.
The feeling of helplessness. It's out of my control. What can I do? The antidote. I am not helpless. I can make a difference. You always have control over the decision to launch or abort.
Third, invulnerability.
This is a big one. The belief that bad things only happen to other people. I've flown in high wind before. It won't happen to me. The antidote is simple. It could happen to me.
Fourth, impulsivity.
The need to act quickly without thinking, I have to get this shot right now before the light changes. The antidote. Not so fast. Think first. Use your checklist.
And last one, macho.
The desire to show off or take unnecessary risks. Watch me land this drone in this tiny space.
Yeah.
The antidote. Taking chances is foolish. Professionalism is about managing risk, not conquering it.
Mastering your equipment is one thing, but mastering your own judgment. That's the real mark of a pro. To really be a systematic, adaptable operator, we have to understand where these regulations came from. The Part 107 framework is a huge step up from the past, and it runs parallel to an equally robust system in Canada. So let's look at the history here.
Yeah, the evolution is fascinating because it shows just how fast this industry has matured. I mean, in the U.S., for decades, drone operations were governed by AC 9157, which came out in 1981. It was a 2-page voluntary guide for hobbyists.
They had no teeth.
No teeth, no commercial structure at all. Now, contrast that with Canada. Before 2019, if you wanted to do any significant commercial flight, you needed a custom Special Flight Operations Certificate, or SFOC. It was this complex, bespoke application for nearly every single job.
Which must have been stifling for the industry.
It was incredibly bureaucratic. And that's why the introduction of Part 107 in the U.S. in 2016 was so revolutionary.
It was a total game changer.
It was. Part 107 wasn't just regulation. The FAA framed it as an economic catalyst. They standardized the safety rules so the industry could actually scale up. The initial projections were huge, 100,000 new jobs, billions in economic activity.
And the system has kept evolving.
It has. It led to the 2021 Mature 107 phase, which brought in standardized rules for things that used to need waivers, like night flight and ops over people, and of course, the remote ID mandate. It's constantly changing.
So if I hold the U.S. Part 107 certificate, and I'm looking at jobs in Canada or vice versa, what does that regulatory crosswalk look like? What knowledge do I already have?
This is the great news. The core knowledge BNA is virtually identical. Both the U.S. Part 107 test and the Canadian RPAS exams for basic and advanced, they all draw their core concepts from international ICAO standards.
So the raw law topics are universal.
They are. Air law, airspace, weather, human factors, aerodynamics. If you master those concepts for Part 107, you are conceptually about 80% of the way there for the Canadian system. The specific numbers and altitudes change, but the principles of risk management do not.
But the certification structure itself, that's the main point of divergence, isn't it?
It is. They differ fundamentally in how they manage risk after the written test.
So how does the U.S. do it?
In the USA, we have a single hard remote pilot certificate, which you get by passing the UAG test. More complex operations, like flying at night or over people, are handled through specific rule sets, like the OOP categories, or by getting a waiver.
Okay, so how does Canada approach it?
Canada uses a tiered approach that's based on risk exposure, and it focuses heavily on proven practical skill.
A tiered approach.
Yeah. You have basic operations, For low-risk flights far from people in controlled airspace, that just needs a written exam. But then you have advanced operations for higher-risk flights, like in controlled airspace or near people. And for that, you need a higher-level written exam plus a mandatory in-person flight review with an accredited examiner.
Ah, that flight review is a crucial difference. The U.S. relies on knowledge and paperwork, while Canada demands a periodic demonstration of hands-on skill for those higher-risk flights.
Exactly. Canada demands practical proof of advanced skill. But when it comes to maintaining your currency, both systems are harmonized.
24-month rule.
The 24 calendar months rule. In the U.S., you take that free online recurrent course. In Canada, you have to complete a mandatory self-paced study program and a questionnaire every 2 years. The intent is the same, a systematic knowledge refresh.
So the ultimate trend seems to be shifting away from just certifying the pilot to certifying the entire system and the operator, especially as we move toward beyond visual line of sight, or BVLOS.
That's the undeniable future. Regulators on both sides know that BVLOS ops like package delivery or long-range pipeline inspection can't just rely on one person watching a screen.
It requires a whole system of safety.
A whole system. And Canada is already building this framework with their RPAS Operator Certificate, or RPOC. It certifies the company's entire safety management system, their training procedures, their maintenance protocols, everything.
Which sounds a lot like the Part 108 framework that's been talked about in the U.S. for years.
It's the conceptual parallel. By mastering the systematic risk management and rigorous ADM in Part 107 now, a U.S. pilot gets a massive head start on understanding the future. The focus is shifting from, is the pilot smart, to, is the organization safe and repeatable?
And to ground all of this complex regulation in the real world, let's come back to the why. Why do we need these incredibly stringent rules and systems?
You just have to look at the example of Zipline operating in Rwanda. They use these fixed-wing drones to deliver emergency blood supplies to remote hospitals. They've cut delivery times from about 4 hours on difficult roads down to 15 minutes.
Wow.
These are highly autonomous, high-speed BVLOS operations in complex, mountainous terrain. And the success of that life-saving network depends entirely on rigorous adherence to air law, advanced weather planning, structural maintenance, and systematic protocols. The rules we are studying today, they are the exact guardrails that allow that kind of life-saving aviation to exist tomorrow.
This has been an incredibly extensive and detailed deep dive. We've provided both the specific facts you need for compliance and the professional framework for systematic operation. You now have the complete test blueprint raw on understanding ACS codes, the hard-to-find technical facts like the 3 axes of flight, the kinetic energy thresholds, and the organizational framework with ADM and CRM.
I think the most valuable takeaway here is the strategic utility of all this knowledge. Don't just pass the test and then forget the material. You have to treat your Part 107 certification not as a static license, but as the foundation of an ongoing professional 24-month skill cycle.
The knowledge only degrades if you let it.
Exactly. To stay sharp, to maintain that resilience, you have to deliberately practice these concepts, review your flights for small failures, and actively close those gaps your AKTR showed you, even years later.
That's the key.
So here is the final challenge for you. We covered the 5 hazardous attitudes. What one specific element of aeronautical decision-making, be it recognizing impulsivity in yourself, countering invulnerability, or establishing a mandatory CRM checklist before every flight, what one thing are you going to embed into your personal pre-flight checklist starting today? How will you use this systematic, risk-managed approach to ensure you are the adaptable, trusted aviator that regulators and high-end clients rely on? Go make that decision. That's a wrap on today's mission, Commander. See above, go beyond, get ahead. For more training, tools, and intel, head to skycommander.ca. If you learned something new, share it, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star debrief.